Welcome to Simmons Says, where I help emerging and struggling writers create intriguing plots and compelling characters to make their stories hard to put down and even harder to forget. Good afternoon, everybody. Alex Simmons here. Having a curious mind, being observant, enjoying discovering things, enjoying sharing thoughts or experiences or feelings, enjoying questioning things. That's a big part of the package of being a creative, being an actor, being a writer, being a composer, being a poet. And so I think if you're feeling any or all of those things, that's fantastic. That's a great place to start. That's a great platform from which to spring out into the world and see what happens. Now, from the practical end of that, if you're going to just do that for yourself, wonderful. Go for it full out. Don't worry about anything. On the other hand, if you're going to try and do those things with an eye towards sharing that material with other people, either independently, publishing your own work, or being hired by publishing houses, studios, or whatever, then there are certain criterias you need to experience and habits and techniques and methodologies you need to explore. And eventually pick the ones that work best for you and put them on your tool belt. That's the way I like to look at it. There are certain questions that are going to come up as a creative writer. And sometimes you will figure those out as you go, and other times you're going to hit a wall. So, one of the things I'm going to do is answer a few questions that were submitted to me and see if my sharing my point of view on these things will be helpful to you. What I may share with you is my POV, maybe the methodology that some people I know or people I read or respect also use, but it's not the only one. But maybe this one will be useful to you. So let me look at my list here. And the first one I have here says, I have tons of ideas, but always missing the why. Mm. First off, for those of you who are wondering, what the heck is the why? Do you mean why I'm writing this thing as opposed to going to play baseball or taking a swim or working out in the gym or taking a nap or whatever? Yeah. Yeah, one could ask that question. Why do I feel compelled to write this story as opposed to those other things? But there's also the why of why are my characters doing what they're doing, or why are they in the situation that they're in? And so those are two different questions, but answering both is going to be useful to you as a writer and as an artist. So I'm going to take the second question I'm going to take first, which is the why, finding the why of your characters. There are a couple of places that you can look for that. Actually, there's several, but we'll start with you create a character in your head, whatever he, she, they are, and then you're thinking this character is a young woman and they're 15 years old or they're 25 years old and they live in such and such a city or town or village and they're in this particular situation. Fine. That's your basic idea, your basic plot element, right? And then you have to ask yourself, so what does this character want or need? Now, someone might say, well, maybe they need a job or what. Yeah, but why? Why do they need the job? Well, they need the job because they need to make money. Why? Why do they need to make money? If they're a young kid, why do they need to make money? Aren't their parents taking care of them? What's the situation there, right? And if the parents are taking care of them, they don't need for money that way, then why does this kid need money? Why? What is it that the kid wants that they need to get money to obtain, right? And this goes for any kind of circumstance. I just use that as a loose illustration. But the reality is, why do people need to get married? Why do people need to rob a bank? Why do people need to destroy the world? Why? If you look at Thanos, the character in Marvel, in the comic books, he was in love with death, an entity, which death as an entity, as opposed to the concept of death, but was in and not quite right in the head. And that's just short of that. But the movie gave him the why of the universe is overcrowded. There's not enough resources to sustain this much life. So I'm making it my mission to save the universe and to save a certain portion of the universe by eliminating the other half. Once I get rid of half of the universe, half of the living beings in the universe, then the rest of us will be fine. We'll have enough resources. That's his why for destroying and killing and all this other stuff. Yes, it's insane what he chooses to do to bring this about, but some people, especially those who are aware of our environmental challenges, have to go, well, yeah, I kind of understand it. Water, the ice caps are melting, the air pollution. Well, yeah, I get it, but at least you know the character's why. So one of the things you want to do is ask yourself as you're developing the character. You haven't started writing the story yet, even, right? What does the character want? What does the character need? All right. Next, they need X, whatever that is, right? What's getting in the way of them getting it or winning or obtaining or getting rid of? What's stopping them? What's the conflict? Now, sometimes when I mention conflict, people say, oh, I don't want to have fight scenes. I don't want to have guns. I don't want to have, it's not a war story. It's just about two people, parents who are having a problem, or a parent and child who's having a problem, or Joe Blow who's wimpy and everything, and life is just hard for him. And I just want to show a day in the life of this person who's basically suffering. I'm not saying that the conflict has to be something earth shattering. It doesn't have to be combative in the military sense or the guns blazing sense or even the fight scene sense. No. Conflict means there is resistance. You want something or you need something, and there's something in the way. You can't get it. No matter what you do, you haven't been able to obtain it. Or you want it so bad, but you're afraid that you're not worthy, and you've got to work against that sense, that possibly false belief that you're not worthy. That's a conflict. I need to do this, but I don't believe I can. And subsequently, I can't until X, right? So conflict simply means the resistance. What's the pushback? What's the thing that's making it difficult for your protagonist to get where they need to or want to be? Right? So that can be loss. It can be a fear of taking that next step, of leaving something behind, of maybe proving that they're, discovering they're not worthy of X. What's the conflict that's holding them back, right? Um, Another thing you want to think about is the emotional mindset of your character, right? The why. So again, you want to know what they need. You want to establish the conflict that's holding them back, what's preventing them. And then how are they dealing with it? How are they dealing with it? Are they being zen about it? Oh, well, all things will come in their time. Are they tremendously frustrated and angry and therefore it's causing them to act out? Or are they unable to voice that? Or have they not yet discovered what that blockage is? And subsequently they're confused and doing erratic things or irrational things? Are they drinking? Are they acting out with, in front of people that love them and now they're driving those people away? You want to look at how are they reacting? How are your characters reacting to the conflict that's preventing them from getting to their goal? When you have at least those three things mapped out in, and again, I'm talking notes. I'm not talking a thesis now. I'm not talking a brilliant presentation or dissertation on all. No, I'm talking notes, basic notes that say give you a certain amount of information, right? When you have those three questions, you're able to look at your story and go, if my character needs this, and this thing is in the way, and it's making them feel such and such, then my story is about how do they deal with this and do they get to that and why it means so much to them to get to that. That's what you're on the journey to discover. Now, again, I'm going to just elaborate on that a little bit more. When I said that's what you are on the journey to discover, A lot of aspiring and emerging writers have, we get caught in a false belief sometimes that we're supposed to have all the answers before we start writing. Even if we, we're trying to put together a bullet point outline of our story, we're thinking, yeah, but I should have it all figured out. I'm just gonna make a quick list because I know everything. You don't. You don't. The first person you tell the story to is yourself. That's the first person. And even though you may have a lot of the elements floating around, you may see a beginning and have a great idea of how you want it to end. The steps that are going to get you there, what your character is going to go through, the changes, the exchanges, all of that, that's the journey. And during that journey, you will discover things that you hadn't quite thought of before. Or you'll discover, yeah, that idea I had is going to work, but I can add this and it's going to be even better. So that's the journey. We're on a journey of discovery when we're writing. So having the three basic questions answered roughly, the why for your character, simply means that now that they have a basic idea of what they're up against, what's in the way, how they feel about it, as they go on this journey, we're going to find out what they're going to do to try and get there. I'm going to discover what they're going to really do, how badly they want it, and maybe even discover a deeper reason for why they are doing what they're doing. That happens as you get to know your character more, and we'll talk about characters in a little bit. All right. So that's the why of the character, the why of the story. Why do I want to do this story? I think that for the most part, I can answer that one, I'm going to say fairly simply, although it has layers to it. I tend to tell my students and my clients that who you are, where you come from, how you were raised, what you believe, what you're opposed to, how you feel about life, your neighbors, all those things, how you feel about love or loss, right? All of that, who you are, is the filter through which your stories pass. It's the lens through which you see the world. And subsequently, it is the lens through which you will show us, the world, the stories that you want to tell and how you feel about them or how you see them. So, getting in touch with who you are, what you want, what moves you, what inspires you, what pisses you off, what injustices you want to rail against, or what blessings you want to share with us. Those things, getting in touch with those things, making a list of those things, and being inspired by those things become your why. Why do I want to tell a story about a black soldier of fortune in the 1930s as opposed to a black superhero in present day? That was a question for myself many years ago. And the reason was fairly simple because A, growing up in the 50s as I did, I didn't see 99.44% of the time, I did not see black heroes in films or television shows or in many books until the 1960s, late 60s into the 70s. So for a good portion of my early life, only heroes I saw were white. They could be from America, they could be from another country, but that was it. My folks, in terms of representation, were servants and porters and things like that, comic relief and that sort of thing. That's how we were portrayed. I'm not saying that's who we are. That's how we were portrayed, right? And then that began to change. But as an adult, I was still looking at a big gaping blank spot. And yet, historically, I knew we had been adventurers, doctors, inventors, world travelers, soldiers, all of these things. So I wanted to create a series by which I could portray a hero of color during that time when, yes, we were doing outstanding, outrageous, heroic things, right? Reflect on that time and better represent us, but also better represent other cultures. Because again, when I was growing up, a lot of what I saw were Chinese characters played by white actors, East Indian, Middle Eastern characters played by white actors. As a matter, 90% of the time, yes, 90, not 99, but 90% of the time, the films and TV shows, if somebody was even a Native American, an Indian, right? White actor in makeup. And the stereotypes that were applied from the early 1900s forward were utilized in these stories. And so I wanted to try and more respectfully represent the different cultures, races, or whatever, or different countries even, in the stories I was going to tell, while revealing some of the truths about the things that we people of color, had done in the past. That was my why. Now, how well I pull it off and all that, that becomes a whole nother challenge. Creating the character, creating his whys and all that, another challenge. But I had to figure out why I wanted. Oh, and I'm sorry, I left out one other thing. As a kid, I loved adventure stories. I loved hero stories. And guess what? I wanted to be one. As a kid, I wanted to grow up and be one. I wanted to go on adventures. So the kid in me is still being satisfied by this character that I created. That was another why. So who I am, what I experience, what I believe, what I feel, definitely were filters through which my stories developed, were inspired, developed, and have been told. It's the same thing for you. All right. You look at the questions in your head, the discoveries you've made, all those things, and decide, what do I want to speak about? What do I want to share? What do I want to reveal? And then make some notes and see if from that spark you can light a fire to write a story. Okay, oddly enough, I think that's it for today. Go forth and be brilliant. Keep those cards and letters and questions coming. And thank you for dropping by. Bye bye.